The day Antony's first love returned to the country, I set our marital home ablaze. Then, I vanished from the world with our twin children. Back then, I had rushed into a raging fire to save him, losing my sight in the process. But he believed I had blinded myself on purpose, scheming to marry him and tear him apart from his first love. Now that my vision has returned, it's time for me to leave. The day Antony's first love returned to the country, I set our marital home ablaze. Then, I vanished from the world with our twin children. Back then, I had rushed into a raging fire to save him, losing my sight in the process. But he believed I had blinded myself on purpose, scheming to marry him and tear him apart from his first love. Now that my vision has returned, it's time for me to leave. The children had begged Antony for a long time before he finally agreed to celebrate their birthday with them. But as the food on the table grew cold, they sat by the cake, refusing to go to bed. Antony never showed up. I knew where he was. Grabbing my cane, I fumbled my way out the door. Stumbling down the street, I had no idea how many fresh wounds I added to my already scarred legs. Just as I was about to push open the private lounge door, I heard Antony's friend speaking inside. "Stacy's back. What are you going to do about that blind woman and the twins?" "Divorce her." Antony's answer came without hesitation. Of course. If his family hadn't forced him to marry a blind woman like me, Stacy wouldn't have left the country in the first place. That's why, on our wedding day, Antony protested by disappearing. I was left alone to go through the entire ceremony, becoming the laughingstock of the city. For a whole year after the wedding, we never saw each other. Then, in one night of reckless passion, I became pregnant with our twins. The day they were born, he didn't even spare them a glance. To him, they were nothing but evidence of his betrayal toward his true love. When he promised to celebrate their birthday, I naively thought this icy man might finally be warming up. Silence filled the room until someone spoke again. "Honestly, Roberta treats you well. She even gave birth to your kids. They're already so big now." Another friend immediately refuted, "So what? If she hadn't schemed to blind herself and guilt-trip Antony into marrying her, he wouldn't have wasted so many years apart from Stacy. A pathetic blind woman like her should be grateful she even got to marry Antony. Now that Stacy is back, the real lovers can finally reunite." My heart clenched. Then, Antony's cold voice cut through the air. "Talking about a blind woman is such a mood killer. Let's drink." He spoke as if I disgusted him. My life has never gone the way I wanted. It keeps veering off course, stumbling into endless snowstorms. When we first met, I was the pampered daughter of a wealthy family, and he was a rising star in the business world. At my art exhibition, while other men showered me with compliments, he was the only one quietly admiring my paintings. Dressed in a crisp white shirt, he stood against the backdrop of my self-portrait, a girl in a sunlit rice field. It was as if he had stepped right into the painting. When our eyes met, he smiled faintly. "You're as beautiful as these works of art, Miss Roberta." A gentle breeze from the rice fields brushed against my heart, making it race wildly. From that moment on, I fell for him. For 6 years, I harbored a one-sided love. Antony always remained polite and distant, never outright rejecting me. I thought I was good enough for him. I believed I could win his heart. But then, my family collapsed. Everyone was gone. I was the only one left. And though I was still alive, it was only in body, not in spirit. Then, I ran into a burning building to save Antony. I lost my sight. I lost my family. I lost my ability to paint. His family, fearing public scrutiny, forced him to marry me. Only then did I realize that the woman he had always wanted to marry was his first love. He despised me. That night, Antony came home drunk for the first time. Before I could say a word, he reeked of alcohol and pulled me into a tight embrace. I struggled, but he was too strong. As he tore my clothes apart like a beast, all I could think about was the young man he used to be, the one who once smiled at me and said, "You're as beautiful as a work of art, Miss Roberta." The next morning, pain racked my entire body. Then, a slap landed across my face. "You really will do anything to get what you want," he spat. I think, this was all a mistake from the start. I should have left long ago. I returned to the villa, the prison built for me after our marriage. The children were still awake. They ran up to me and clung to my legs. "Mommy, is Daddy back too?" I heard them run to the door, only to come back, choking back tears. Brett looked up at me and sobbed. "Does Daddy not want us?" My heart twisted in agony. I knelt and held them close. "Mommy wants you. Will you come with me? Life might be hard, but it would be better than living like rats in the shadows." Claire gently touched the corner of my eyes. "Don't cry, Mommy. Wherever you go, we'll go too." That night, after tucking them in, I finally broke down in uncontrollable sobs. Being my children, they had never known a moment of happiness. Carrying them for 10 months was already hard enough, let alone as a blind woman. Anthony knew I struggled, yet he never once accompanied me to a prenatal checkup. When he first saw our children, he only said 2 words. "Disgusting." To the outside world, he never acknowledged them. Even when they called him daddy, he scolded them. Born in wedlock, yet treated worse than illegitimate children. Every time they asked when Daddy would come home, I made up excuse after excuse. Eventually, even they stopped believing me. Leaving would set everyone free. Perhaps Anthony suddenly remembered his promise. Late at night, he returned. As I fumbled to pack our belongings, an icy hand grabbed my wrist. His voice, laced with coldness, rang in my ears. "What do you think you're doing?" The strong scent of alcohol brought back memories of that night, making me freeze. I forced myself to speak calmly. "The house is a mess. I'm just tidying up." The air turned eerily silent. A cold draft from the window sent shivers through me. Then, Anthony yanked me into his arms, his voice trembling with desperation. "Don't go, okay? Stacy?" He was so drunk that he mistook me for her. Before I could push him away, he pressed his lips against mine. His tongue pried my lips open, the taste of alcohol invading my senses. His hands roamed down my body, as if he wanted to devour me completely. Humiliation. Pain. They crashed over me like waves, drowning me. For the first time, I completely broke down. I shoved him away with all my strength and screamed hysterically. "If you love Stacy, why did you marry me? Why trap me in this prison and ignore me?" He had no answer. But his anger was palpable. Perhaps he noticed the wounds on my legs. His voice darkened. "You went looking for me? What did you hear?" I no longer cared. I let everything out. "You think Stacy left just because of our marriage? She left for her own selfish future. How dare you talk about her?" He shoved me, and my weak, exhausted body collapsed backward. My head hit the ground hard. A sharp pain spread through my skull. Then, suddenly, light. The darkness faded, dissolving into a mist. Slowly, everything became clearer. In my daze, I seemed to see Anthony reaching out to me anxiously, only to withdraw his hand at the last moment. He stood there, his face as cold as ice. "You wanted me back. I'm back. This is the end of it." Then, his figure vanished into the night. Suddenly, I realized I could see. I could actually see. I rushed into the bedroom, placing Brent and Claire's tiny hands against my face, feeling their warmth. At last, I was certain. This wasn't a dream. I had truly regained my sight. The tears in that moment were of pure joy. And with that, my determination to take them away only grew stronger. The next day, Anthony sobered up and had his secretary send birthday gifts for Brent and Claire. The children tossed them at the door without hesitation. Brent looked at the gifts with disdain. "It's not even my birthday today. What's the point of giving me this now?" Claire pouted in frustration. "We used to want Daddy to come home because we wanted him to be with Mommy. But since Mommy doesn't want Daddy anymore, then we don't want him either." Unloved children learn to tread carefully from an early age. Barely over 2 years old, yet their maturity far exceeded their years. So sensible, it was heartbreaking. Claire's soft little voice asked me, "Mommy, where are we going?" I smiled and told him, "We're going back to Mommy's hometown." The grand family estate was long sold. Now, all we had left was my grandmother's old house in the countryside, her little paradise that she refused to leave until her dying breath. There are no amusement parks or skyscrapers there, but you'll hear birds singing, see flowers blooming, and watch little streams flow under stone bridges. The two little ones hugged me tightly, cutting off the rest of my words. As long as mommy is with us, anywhere is the best place in the world. Lately, Anthony and I had both been busy. He was preparing to bring Stacy back to the country, while I was preparing to leave with the kids. To escape from someone as powerful as Anthony, I had to time everything perfectly. Even though the children said they didn't want their father, the night before we left, they still stared at his photo, lost in thought. After hesitating again and again, I finally dialed Anthony's number. The call connected, his voice impatient. "What is it?" "The kids want to see you one last time." "Do you want to come back?" Would he come back for a final goodbye? "I finally made it back home, and you're not even paying attention to me." "I'm going to be mad." It was Stacy's voice. So, he was with her. There was no hesitation on his end, the call ended immediately. When fate is truly over, even a final goodbye becomes a luxury. The portrait of the young girl in the rice field still hung by the bed, as if I could still smell the sweet scent of the fields. I lit a match and set it aflame. The fire devoured everything in its path, roaring through the villa until nothing remained. My marriage with Anthony began in flames, and now, it ended in flames. Against the blazing inferno, I walked away with my children, never looking back. "Anthony, the freedom you wanted, I've given it back to you." The fire was too fierce, strong enough to turn even the most eternal things to ashes. I returned to my grandmother's old house in the countryside. Since her passing, everything had remained untouched, only covered in layers of dust. Brushing the dust away, I could almost see her again, holding a giant watermelon and calling me over to eat. She'd slice it in half, then worry it wasn't enough and let me scoop it out with a spoon, laughing at how I made a mess all over my face. Now, I lived with my children, learning to embrace a quiet and simple life, just like she did. The news reported on the villa fire, saying Anthony's wife and their twin children had likely perished in the blaze. While the fire raged, devouring everything, Anthony was at a hotel with Stacy. She excused herself to take a bath, telling him to wait for her. Anthony knew exactly what she was implying. But when she finally emerged wrapped in a towel, he felt nothing. When Stacy eagerly pressed herself against him, his body instinctively rejected her. Without thinking, he pushed her away. "Sorry, something urgent came up at the company. I have to go." He left in a hurry, confused by his own reaction. Even with Roberta, he had never felt this way. When he heard about the fire, he froze for a moment. A flicker of regret crept into his mind. If he had gone back that night, would things have turned out differently? Still, he convinced himself that this was just another one of Roberta's ploys to get his attention. That woman was as lowly as ever, using any means necessary to achieve her goals. What kind of trick is she playing now? His voice dripped with contempt. But then, his mother placed something on his desk, the charred remains of a diamond ring and 2 half-burned gifts. That wedding ring was the only thing tying Roberta to him. She treasured it, never once taking it off. And the gifts, his birthday presents for the kids, hadn't even been opened before they were destroyed by the flames. The fire started in the bedroom. It looks like she set it herself. The door was locked from the inside. No one could have made it out alive. Anthony's breath hitched. "You're saying, she chose to stay inside, willing to burn to death with the kids in our bedroom?" He refused to believe it. He had to expose her deception. Rushing into the ruins, he frantically dug through the ashes, desperate to find proof that Roberta had survived. If she had dared to fake her death, he would make her pay. But there was nothing. Only ashes. The children's gifts, left outside the door, were the only reason a part of them remained. As for Roberta, nothing was left at all. He had always thought of her as a spoiled heiress who knew nothing of love or sincerity. Later, he saw her as a manipulative woman, scheming for his power, someone he and the children found utterly repulsive. Now, she had erased herself from his life with death, and yet, he felt no satisfaction. That night, Anthony had a dream. In the dream, he had gone to celebrate the children's birthday. They excitedly unwrapped their gifts, bouncing around and calling him Daddy. And he never once called out Stacy's name. Instead, he reached for Roberta and whispered, "Don't go." This time, he didn't push her away. He held her tightly. When she called, inviting him to see the kids, he happily agreed. They sat together as a family, laughing over dinner. In his sleep, a small smile curled his lips, as if savoring the warmth of that moment. Then, a clap of thunder jolted him awake. Reaching for the empty space beside him, he finally came to his senses. He found the dream ridiculous. As if he would ever want to spend his life with such a despicable woman. Roberta was dead, gone like a drop of water disappearing into the sea. He kept telling himself that he felt nothing. Meanwhile, I was happier in the countryside than I had ever been in the city. Once, my birthdays came with an entire amusement park as a gift. Now, with my own hands, rough and calloused, I could still give my children warmth and security. Before long, they reached school age. To stay close to them, I took a job as a kindergarten teacher in town. Now, the whole kindergarten called me Mommy. 2 years passed. Occasionally, people would try to introduce me to potential husbands. The usual candidates: decent family backgrounds, living parents, someone who could provide support, making life easier than raising 2 children alone. I always smiled and declined. Until one day, the children saw their father on TV again. Anthony was even more successful now, giving an interview as a financial tycoon. Naturally, Stacy was right by his side. The reporter asked Anthony, "Your wife passed away 2 years ago. When do you plan to marry Miss Stacy?" Anthony pressed his lips together, yet to respond, but Stacy immediately jumped in. "Stay tuned, everyone." The children turned around and saw me watching too. They quickly turned off the TV. I smiled indifferently. "Let's go fishing." The children cheered as they ran out the door. When we returned, covered in mud, I almost thought I was hallucinating. Anthony, the man I had fought so hard to escape, was standing right outside my door. A pile of cigarette ash lay at his feet. Clearly, he had been waiting for a long time. The dappled afternoon sunlight flickered through the trees. His face looked thinner, exhausted. He stubbed out his cigarette with his shoe. His eyes swept over me, and he smirked. "My late wife, is this what you've been reduced to after leaving me? You really made me work to find you." I knew what it meant to deceive Anthony. This man was ruthless. If he was here, it could only mean one thing. He had come for my life. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were weighed down with lead. I could only stare at him in silence. "You can see now? Why didn't you tell me?" As he stepped forward to grab me, I scooped up the children and ran into the house. Just as I was about to slam the door shut, his hand shot in. A tremendous force wedged his palm in the doorway, nearly crushing it out of shape. He grunted in pain but refused to pull back. I wasn't strong enough to keep him out. He was about to push his way in. I fought him like a madwoman, clawing at him, resisting him. In the struggle, his collar ripped with a loud tear. A necklace slipped out, swinging in front of me. Hanging from the chain was my wedding ring. Why, was he still carrying my ring? I froze for a moment, and in that instant, Anthony reached for the children. Through the crack in the door, he spoke gently to Brent and Claire. "I'm your father. Come to me." Brent and Claire remained firmly against the door, refusing to respond. I had no idea what he was trying to do. Back then, whenever they called him Dad, he would lash out, saying they were unworthy of calling him that. And now? What was this act? I had no choice. I let him inside. Once Brent and Claire were sent away, it was just the two of us. Anthony lounged on my worn wooden sofa like he owned the place, casually examining the fresh wounds on his hand. "I want custody of the kids. Compared to someone as poor as you, I'm clearly the better choice." I let out a cold laugh. "When are their birthdays? What's their favorite food? What allergies do they have? Do you even know?" Anthony was silent. He realized he didn't know a single answer. But soon, he regained his usual composed arrogance. "If you come back to me, there won't be any custody battle. Otherwise, you'll see what I'm capable of." I looked at him and chuckled. I doubt Stacy would be so generous. Instead of getting angry, Anthony laughed, eyes glinting with amusement. "You're jealous? That means you still care." Suddenly, he stood up and yanked my wrist, attempting to kiss me. He was trying to force me again, but I was no longer the person I used to be. I slapped him. Hard. Have some respect. Naturally, we parted on bad terms. But I remained clear-headed. His lowered pride wasn't love, it was just his need to regain control. His possessiveness. The next morning, loud noises echoed from the house next door. On my way to drop the kids off at school, I realized Anthony had moved his entire office next door. He was sweating, carrying a coffee machine, and greeting the kids. "Good morning." Brent and Claire turned their heads away, refusing to acknowledge him. Anthony turned to me and grinned. "If you won't come back with me, I'll stay." Funny. He reminded me of my past self. Back when I couldn't see, yet still tried so hard to be the perfect wife for him. When I was blind, I had to relearn everything. Cooking, for example. My hands were covered in fresh and old burns, but I kept going. Yet Anthony never ate a single bite of my cooking. I thought maybe it was because I wasn't pretty enough. So I carefully felt my own face, drawing my brows, applying makeup. But what was the point? He never came home. Day or night, there was no difference to me. Only darkness. Only me, alone. When love is gone, everything is meaningless. Just like him, now. Anthony started waiting outside the kindergarten every day for the children. Even though neither the kids nor I acknowledged him, he still watched from a distance. At lunchtime, smoke curled from the village chimneys, blending into the sky. Every household had its own delicious scents. Anthony sat there, chewing on a piece of dry bread, looking pitifully at me. "Can I join you for a meal?" The man who once turned his nose up at my cooking was now joking that he'd pay any price for it. But some things can't be bought with money. Then, for some reason, he started planting flowers in the yard. The scent of lilies drifted over the fence when they bloomed. I once loved lilies. I kept pots of them on the windowsill. But back then, even though Anthony barely came home, he couldn't tolerate them because of his pollen allergy. He crushed every flower I had carefully grown. Just like he crushed me. And yet, now he took allergy medicine just to keep them. If this had been the past, I would have obsessed over figuring out his motives. But now, I didn't care. Once he got bored of his ridiculous win-her-back game, he'd return to his high-and-mighty life. But what I didn't expect was that Anthony, the man who had lived a life of luxury, actually stayed in this poor little village for months. Another year passed. The kids and I sat in the yard, eating snacks and gazing at the full moon. The sky was cloudless. The moon was so round, so bright. Every year, when the moon was full, I would visit my grandmother in the countryside. We would share a giant mooncake, dividing it among the family. Grandma always gave me the piece with the most salted egg yolk. Now, I carried on her tradition, giving the best parts to my children. Brent and Claire bounced over to me, holding out the biggest piece. "Mommy eats first." I smiled, touched, and patted their heads. Across the fence, Anthony sat in his yard too. Only his wine kept him company. His figure looked lonely. He drank in silence, occasionally glancing in our direction. The moon is round, but people are not whole. Or, when people are whole, the moon is not round. Looking at the same moon, we all felt something different. Anthony suddenly spoke, staring at me. "Tell me your story." But what was there to tell? Once a wealthy heiress, I had fallen to nothing. Suffering piled on top of suffering, nearly drowning me. At my lowest, debt collectors hunted me down. I lived like a sewer rat. Drinking dirty river water when I was thirsty, digging through trash when I was hungry. Even so, I was caught. They were like demons out for blood. When they saw I had no money, they demanded I sell my first night to pay the debt. I've accepted my fate. Since my family's downfall, I have nothing left to lose. But then, Anthony appeared like a savior, pulling me out of my misery. He tossed a wad of cash at them from his high perch and warned them not to trouble me again. Maybe, to him, that money was nothing, perhaps he only pitied me like a beggar on the street. But to me, it was salvation, a dying ember in my decayed life, blooming into a flower. Later, I realized that flower was never mine. I had only passed by when it was in full bloom. My aunt from abroad reached out, saying she wanted to adopt me. She had married overseas years ago and lived a comfortable life. Now that all the paperwork was done, she wanted me to fly over and start anew. On the day of my departure, I happened to see Stacy and her friends having coffee. She was animated, showing off to her friends. Anthony just has a little money, that's all. His foundation is unstable. I've met an old money investor abroad, and he wants to bring me into his investments. Once I find the right opportunity to break up with Anthony, I'll scam him for a hefty investment sum. I knew I shouldn't meddle in others' affairs, but I just couldn't let it go. After much hesitation, I decided to tell Anthony what I had overheard. But no matter how many times I called, I couldn't get through to him. When I finally arrived at Anthony's villa in the suburbs, the place was engulfed in flames. I immediately called the fire department. Realizing that Anthony might still be inside, I soaked my coat in water, covered my nose and mouth, and rushed in. Through the thick black smoke, I saw Anthony collapsed by the bedroom door, unconscious. Flames surrounded him, threatening to consume him entirely. I ran in and tried to lift him, but he was too heavy. I could only drag him inch by inch, struggling forward. The smoke burned my throat, and the searing heat stung my eyes. By the time I finally pulled him outside, I collapsed right next to him. When I woke up, all I could see was darkness. I had missed my flight. And I had lost my sight. In agony, I clawed at my own face, unable to accept this cruel fate. Once, I had been a prodigy in the art world, now, I couldn't even see colors. Anthony's family, burdened with guilt, forced him to marry me. Outsiders envied me, thinking a fallen heiress like me had hit the jackpot. Some even resented me, claiming I had schemed to blind myself just to tie Anthony down. But only I knew. I had always been the victim. I used to want to explain, but Anthony never listened. Now, he had learned to listen. But I no longer wanted to explain. Seeing my silence, Anthony called my name softly. Roberta. The stars shattered in his eyes, or perhaps it was just the glint of tears. You always kept quiet, making me forget that you were suffering too. Roberta, I owe you my life. Let me spend the rest of it repaying you. No. Just then, school had ended, and the kindergarten entrance was bustling with parents. Stacy had somehow found me. Holding up a banner, she shouted accusations for everyone to hear. This kindergarten teacher has no morals. She seduced my boyfriend. How can someone like her be trusted to teach children? Her inflammatory words quickly riled up the crowd. I thought she seemed decent, but turns out she's shameless. I've seen her getting close to a man, so she's a mistress. No wonder. A single mother like her must be desperate for company. Just as the situation was about to spiral, Brent and Claire burst through the crowd, standing in front of me. My mom is not that kind of person. She never even liked Dad, he's the one who keeps pestering her. Yeah. Our mom is a good person. She's not a mistress. I didn't want my children to get hurt by adult affairs. You too, go inside. It's my job to protect you, not the other way around. After much coaxing, they finally agreed to go in. Stacy still wanted to continue her rant, but I rubbed my hands together, then slapped her hard across the face. She raised her hand to retaliate, but just then, Anthony arrived, shoving through the crowd to stand in front of me. Slap. The hit landed squarely on his face. Stacy froze in shock. I didn't mean to hit you. Anthony's eyes were as cold as ice, devoid of any warmth as he looked at her. Haven't I told you? We're over. When Stacy had publicly declared their engagement to the media, Anthony had flown into the biggest rage of his life. There would only be one wife in his lifetime, Roberta. Ever since Roberta left, I stopped lying to myself. My heart has made it clear, she's the one I love. You knew I didn't love you, yet you still took my money and clung to me. Stacy, your behavior only makes me despise you more. Leave. Panic-stricken, Stacy grabbed his wrist. Why? You weren't like this before. You said you loved me, that you'd marry me, that you'd make it up to me. Why did you suddenly change? Did Roberta's sweet talk deceive you? She's a penniless beggar, what other reason could she have for getting close to you, except for your money? Wake up. Stacy's voice rose into a desperate scream. Anthony shoved her off without any emotion. I'm perfectly clear-headed. I know what I want. I never expected Anthony to stand up for me. No matter what, I had to face the past on my own. Turning to the judging parents, I finally spoke up. I was once Antony's wife. At that time, my family had fallen, drowning in debt. I admit, I wasn't in the best place when I married him. But that was because I lost my sight while saving his life. He owed me that much. After marriage, I did my best to be a good wife. But my husband was trapped in his fantasy of being a devoted lover, clinging to the woman who caused this mess. I never cried or argued. I only wanted to live out the rest of my days in darkness. But that night, Antony, drunk out of his mind, forced himself on me. And I got pregnant. I bore all his resentment. And when the child was born, he never took responsibility. His heart always belonged to that woman. I had no choice but to leave with my children. Now he's come back, saying he regrets it. And today, that woman dared to show up here. Not just to harass me, but to affect my children's well-being. That, I will never allow. I did nothing wrong. The ones in the wrong are them. As I finished, I finally let go of the suffocating pain I had held in for so long. A weight lifted off my chest. Many of the parents were stay-at-home mothers. How different was my story from theirs? The crowd began to rally behind me. They were legally married. What right does she have to cause trouble? I support Roberta. I support Roberta too. Get lost. Seeing that no one was on her side anymore, not even Antony. Stacy clung to his arm, her voice almost pleading. I failed in my investments abroad. I'm drowning in debt. The money you gave me wasn't nearly enough. Are you really going to let them beat me to death over unpaid debts? Antony's brows furrowed as he studied her. So that's why you came back. Before she could argue, the police arrived and dragged her away. The crowd dispersed, and silence returned. Antony wanted to step forward and grab Roberta's hand, but in the end, he withdrew. Unlike the indifference from before, this time, he was cautious, afraid he might break her if he wasn't careful. Can we start over? Antony's smile was ingratiating, and the weariness in his eyes shimmered with a trace of moisture. I had asked myself this question countless times. Did Antony ever love me? Maybe, in this moment, he did. But that answer had already expired. My smile carried a sense of release. Antony, let me go, and let yourself go too. In that second, something in Antony seemed to collapse. It felt like he saw Roberta's figure shatter into countless fragments, pieces he couldn't grasp. He thought, maybe it's better not to push her too hard. There would be another chance, there had to be. If you don't want to see me now, I'll come back another time, he said. No need for another time, no need for next time, no need for the future, I replied, firm, as if stating an undeniable truth. Antony understood that his heart, which had been torn to shreds by his own actions, couldn't be mended even with flesh and blood. The moment he admitted that he loved Roberta, he realized too late that he, too, was full of holes. The cold wind tore through him from the inside, and countless bloodstains soaked his soul. It hurt. It hurt so badly. He finally understood that trying to warm a heart that couldn't be warmed was agonizing. He felt it deeply. As he left, he turned back several times. So often, he thought he saw Roberta, who once hated him so much, suddenly open her arms and say to him, "Let's be together." But she didn't. She stood there, the breeze lifting her skirt. As beautiful as the first time they met, like a work of art. But that work of art had once been shattered by his own hands. It could never be repaired. Antony could only watch as Roberta took the children's hands, and didn't look back. The divorce proceedings between Roberta and Antony went smoothly, and Antony stopped clinging to her. The gentle stream in the small village continued to flow, and Roberta and the children went on living their peaceful lives. Years later, Roberta met someone decent. The children liked him, relied on him, and held Roberta in high regard. So Roberta decided to marry. Life after the wedding was peaceful and filled with joy. Extra chapter. Strangely, when Antony heard that Roberta had been burned to death, he didn't feel the relief he had imagined. It was as if a huge hole had been burned in his heart, leaving it empty. Roberta had loved him so much, how could she leave him without even asking his permission? And to leave in such an irreversible way. He forced himself not to think about it, telling himself to focus on his life with Stacy. But the more he tried, the more his disdain for Stacy became impossible to hide. Arguments broke out between them regularly. Anthony built another villa in the same place, decorating it exactly as it had been before. He stood in the villa, inhaling deeply, as if trying to sense Roberta's presence. Among the ruins of the past, he couldn't help but reflect. Roberta was so foolish, there were so many times she never realized he had returned. He watched her as she fumbled to cook. She drew her face like a cat with flowers. She bent down to change his shoes for him. She asked, "Are we having dinner at home tonight?" His answers always made her sad. Now, everything was either her, or nothing at all. He realized that without her, everything seemed to lose its meaning. No one could replace her. Anthony made a necklace out of their wedding ring, as if she were still by his side. When he found out Roberta was still alive, he felt both angry and excited. He swore to teach her a lesson, so she wouldn't leave him so easily again. But when they actually met, he became the cautious one. He was happy that Roberta regained her sight, but was afraid she would truly reject him. Maybe, if he scared her like he used to, she would come back. But Roberta had really changed. She was strong and brave. Though the children lived in poverty with her, they looked so happy. Roberta refused to go back, so Anthony decided to join her life. That night, the moon was full. He drank a cup of chilled wine, and after a long time, hot tears finally came streaming down. Roberta didn't say anything, just like before, when Anthony never listened. Roberta really didn't want him anymore. It was only on his way back that Anthony realized how deeply he loved her. And it was on the way back that he also realized it was too late, and his love no longer mattered. Stacy had too many debts and was hunted by debt collectors until she disappeared without a trace. When Anthony heard the news, his heart was calm, almost relieved. He still often dreamed of Roberta, and he began to enjoy sleeping more. When awake, he drank himself into a stupor, because it was the only way he could see her. Roberta had gotten married. Her husband wasn't a powerful man, nor was he particularly handsome, just an ordinary guy. The more ordinary he was, the more Anthony fell apart. He had truly lost someone who once loved him so much. At the wedding, Brent and Claire were the flower children. It seemed that the man treated them well. In fact, Anthony had attended the wedding. He had originally planned to stop the ceremony, but when he saw her in the wedding dress, she looked so beautiful. Sadly, he never got to see her wear that dress for him. That man's eyes were full of Roberta, and Roberta smiled happily. Maybe she feared that Anthony would ruin the wedding, so she smiled and raised a toast to him, offering polite thanks. Was he satisfied? Actually, not at all. He even thought about rushing up and stabbing that man's heart, then taking Roberta for himself. This obsessive fantasy almost tore his sanity apart, making him lose control. But Anthony didn't do it. He knew it would only hurt her. He wanted her to be happy. No matter how unwilling, he had no choice. After that, Anthony never married. No other woman ever appeared by his side. For all these years, Anthony had secretly watched Roberta. He selfishly wished she wasn't happy, so he could slip in and take her away. He held on to this obsession for decades. Until his hair turned gray, Anthony watched as Roberta walked down a street lined with sycamore leaves, holding the hand of the man and their grandson. The man brushed the fallen leaves off her shoulders, and Roberta was smiling. Just like that hot, cicada-singing afternoon, Anthony stood in front of that portrait of the girl in the rice field, almost stunned by the artist's talent. Roberta timidly called out his name, smiling gently. His heart jolted. At that moment, he still didn't know that feeling was called love. He only admired her sincerely. "You're as beautiful as these works of art." They passed each other, and Roberta didn't recognize him. She was chatting and laughing with her companion. Even if they met, they wouldn't recognize each other. His face was covered with dust, his hair as white as frost. Anthony felt those happy moments spin around him in a whirlwind. After a long time, he collapsed heavily to the ground. When he returned, Anthony fell gravely ill and couldn't recover. With his last breath, he called Roberta. It was still the same number, and it rang for a long time. When it finally connected, Anthony couldn't wait to call out her name. "Roberta." A man's voice came from the other end. "She's looking for you." Roberta picked up the phone. "Hello? There was no sound for a while. She thought the signal was bad and moved to another spot. Still, no response. Who is it? I don't know. The soup you made for me is still on the stove, don't let it burn. Got it. She had always been happy, so he could rest easy. Thinking this, he used his last bit of strength to hang up the phone. Anthony died alone in the villa, holding a will in his hands. His entire estate was left to his beloved ex-wife and children. The end.